Welcome to District Deep Dive, where we take a look at the history, culture, and political climate of each of Panem's 13 districts. Today, we'll be taking a closer look at not a district, but rather a unique districtless band of nomadic peoples known as the Covey, that predate the districts that we know within the original trilogy. The Covey are exclusively featured within the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, a prequel set 64 years prior to the start of Katniss's games, and within this prequel are exclusively located within District 12. However, the Covey uniquely do not consider themselves to be a part of 12, taking a significant amount of pride in their roots and heritage. Although the Covey's origins are unknown, their history extends far past the days of the original First Rebellion, with them being described as traveling nomads that wandered from district to district to perform back in the times that ordinary district civilians could travel freely. The Covey are furthermore personally familiar with the Wilds, the land that extends beyond the northernmost reaches of Panem, and is commonly described by district civilians as being unpopulated and uninhabitable, although the legitimacy of these claims is questionable. Yet regardless, the Covey have been historically regarded as bizarre outsiders at best and people to completely ostracize at worst. Although this is only hinted at in a handful of brief throwaway lines, it seems the Covey traditionally integrates people that have been discarded by society, as there are surviving members that have been integrated after having been found abandoned as children. While the Covey does not appear to be exclusively composed of discarded orphans, the process of them integrating such is common enough that no Covey members describe this process as being an unusual or traditionally out-of-line one. This makes the Covey a group whose families are not exclusively composed of biological relations, but rather people they consciously integrate, meaning Covey members, in terms of their overall heritage, potentially have roots scattered throughout all of Panem. They are described as being wildly varied in terms of their complexion, hair, and features, suggesting a lack of quote-unquote uniform racial characteristics. The Covey traditionally appear to be fiercely loyal to the Covey as an entity over the individual members of it, and treat each member of the Covey with the unquestioning and unwavering faith we typically extend to only our own blood. It's also worth noting the people as a whole, prior to the First Rebellion, were divided into distinct traveling bands over being consolidated as one extended group. And yet despite this division, the Covey's shared philosophy soothe over any tensions that may arise due to differences in custom or tradition. The Covey believe the core purpose of people is to reduce misery wherever they find it, and given this belief, they've centered their lives around bringing joy to the spaces they occupy. The Covey's songs and dances are typically the sole consistent source of relief and entertainment that ordinary citizens of the districts have access to, and their performances often provide the only form of positive stress release they'll receive. Given this mission, the Covey place tremendous value on their ability to travel without constraint, an essential asset of their lives that is stolen from them after the events of the First Rebellion. The Covey are, at their core, a pacifist, non-violent people, and throughout the events of the First Rebellion, remain neutral. However, to the capital, neutrality is just as punishable a crime as resistance, and the Covey are not spared after the capital secures their victory. After inter-district travel is restricted and then outlawed, the Covey bands are trapped within whatever district they happen to be in at the time of the law's implementation. Shortly after their trapping, the capital rounds up the Covey bands, supposedly for the purpose of forcing them to integrate themselves into the districts, and then proceeds to publicly execute resistors. Yet reading between the lines, this is a process the overwhelming majority of the Covey would have initially resisted, and given that resistance to the capital can mean something as minor as vocally crying out, this appears little more than a thinly veiled excuse to execute the Covey as a whole. But naturally, this prompts the question, why? The Covey, although perceived as unusual, are completely harmless, and outright demonstrated to the capital they were within the First Rebellion. The answer lies in the vast reserves of knowledge the Covey have accumulated by nature of their travels and songs. The ultimate goal of restricting and shutting down inter-district travel is to isolate each district to the extent that any degree of communication or possibility of forming a potential alliance is shut down, as districts only pose a tangible threat to the capital when united. Given this goal, having a living group of people that have detailed memories of not only the distinct cultures and layouts of each district, but of how to outright travel by foot to each poses a risk far too extreme for the capital to willingly tolerate. Notice the commonality between the 6 surviving Covey members within District 12, and that is that all had to have been under the age of 10 years old at the time of the Covey's genocide. While they would retain memories of certain songs, customs, and traditions, this is too young for the lot to perfectly remember and recapture their former way of life. And in ensuring the only surviving Covey members are ones too young to be able to recall their people's history, culture, and ways, the capital ensures the Covey, as an ethnic group, are totally eradicated from Panem. It's worth mentioning at this point the Covey, as a group, are heavily inspired by the Romani peoples, with their history being meant to parallel theirs at multiple points. The forced assimilation of the Covey directly parallels that of the Romani, with there being numerous countries that have implemented legislation meant to restrict the Romani's freedom of movement. Take, for instance, Maria Theresa of Austria, who, in 1758, began a forced assimilation program meant to convert the existing Romani into new Hungarians. The program not only restricted the Romani's travel, but forcibly removed Romani children from their parents to be fostered by non-Romani. Numerous other countries have implemented similar legislation throughout history, and in the way the Covey are killed off en masse, so have the Romani. In 1710, Austria's Joseph I implemented a law demanding that all Romani adult males were to be hanged without trial, whereas women and young males were to be flogged and banished forever, with his brother, Charles VI, later amending the law to call for the execution of adult female Romani and the institutionalization of their children for re-education. Throughout World War II, Nazis killed between 220,000 and 500,000 Romani, and would frequently shoot them on sight when encountered. By the end of the war, almost 25% of European Roma had been killed. However, in the way the Covey inherited the most tragic aspects of their real-life counterparts' history, they also inherited a significant amount of their beauty. The Covey's extravagant, colorful fashion is in many ways meant to mirror the Romani's own, as well as their style of performance and cultural emphasis on art, freedom, and movement. In the way the Romani are not exclusively the tragedies they have previously undergone, neither are the Covey. And while the Covey's traditions may be missing parts, their survivors cling to them all the more fiercely in the wake of their loss. In whatever small way they can, the small band of children we encounter within the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes fights to preserve the life and culture that is rightfully theirs, regardless of the opposition they face. What is especially intriguing to me about this determination is that it defies the rationale that allowed them to be spared at all, that they were too young to recall the exact ins and outs and would inevitably wind up assimilating, when nothing could be further off from the truth. The Covey are perceived as being distinctly other within District 12, and while though the average citizen has no qualms against enjoying the entertainment they provide, they are treated, at best, with suspicion. Why bother with assimilating into a group that will never allow you to close ranks? At best, an implicit, automatic bias, and at worst, outright social ostracization. The Covey exist on the literal margins of society, with their house residing on the edge of the seam, the poorest neighborhood in the poorest district. And yet, although this already is a markedly bleak existence, even bleaker is the implication the Covey are not afforded the innocence we typically extend to children. Lucy Gray is viewed by everyone, capital and district alike, as being an overtly sexual flirt over a 16-year-old girl attempting to ensure her and her family's survival, and is reviled by the people that perceive her this way over pitied. It's no wonder the Covey at the time that we meet them are exclusively reliant on each other. A decade of life within 12 has confirmed to them that no one will guard them but themselves. It's particularly moving to me that the Covey's rebel ballad is nothing you can take, when so much of the Covey's lives is marked by life-altering, devastating loss. If it is not the barbaric execution of every friend or family member they have ever known, it is the destruction of their way of life as they know it. If it is not the destruction of their way of life as they know it, it is the eradication of even the tiniest, most obscure reminders of it. And yet, despite the despair this would understandably elicit, the Covey still endure. Take Tam Amber, a member of the Covey that is described by strangers as always keeping his face somewhat blank during performances, but by the Covey as a lost soul on account of being abandoned as an infant. At the point that Katniss's games occur, the Covey are essentially a distant memory, and yet there is the Goat Man, a sea man that is similarly antisocial. Although never actually confirmed they are one and the same, Tam Amber's dream is to start up a small herd of goats the Covey can live off of, and while a relatively minor victory in comparison to his terrible hardships, it's a victory nonetheless. Furthermore, within District 13, a lone fiddler is described as playing at Finnegan Annie's wedding, the only fiddler in District 12, at least at the time of ballad, being Clark Carmine. We have meager hints denoting the Covey's survival, whether in terms of tradition or individual members, but the most unshakable evidence is found in regards to Mr. Everdeen. Mr. Everdeen, Katniss's father, is a character that never even has his first name unveiled to the audience, and yet although the available information on him is heavily limited, there are numerous hints that imply he is potentially of Covey ancestry. Although there are 3 Covey women, the one that he is most likely descended from is Maud Ivory, Lucy Gray's cousin. Both Maud Ivory and Katniss's father are described as having beautiful singing voices, to the extent the birds themselves stop to listen to them. But Maud Ivory specifically is described as having the ability to memorize any song that she's heard once, this also being a trait that Katniss herself seems to share, with her making the remark that she can memorize anything set to music after a round or two. While this in of itself may be a coincidence, the simple fact that Katniss's father knew and taught her the Hanging Tree song is a particularly compelling piece of evidence, as Maud Ivory is part of a mere handful of people that have ever heard it, meaning that she is the only person that plausibly could have taught him it. Furthermore, deep in the meadow, a song Maud Ivory adored as a child, is cherished by Prim. It's a connection that explains the deep attachment Katniss's father has towards the land, as well as his fondness for the lake house, although Katniss herself likely isn't even aware of this, and one that provides a powerful consolation in the wake of the Covey's desolation, that remnants of them are the very thing that brought all Panem the thing they adored most and yearned for their entire lives, their freedom. Thank you so much for watching another District Deep Dive with us, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And here's an extra special thank you to our Patreons. What we do would not be possible without your support. If you would like to count yourself among them, the link is in the description. Thank you so much for your time, and have a fabulous day.